Hello, and welcome to Temple of the Fallspot, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. We've got a special episode for you.
I'd say.
Bruce! This is the very first episode we've recorded in person. How exciting is that?
Check it out. I know you can't see it. I'm touching Andy right now.
Oh my god.
I just touched him. There we go.
So this is the third episode of Season 4. Which means it's deck tech time.
Sweet!
DTT, deck tech time. This deck that I have brought to the table, quite literally this time, it's Galazeth Prismari. I'll read the card before I really get into the story behind the deck. It's 2 blue-red. It's a 3/4. Legendary creature, Elder Dragon. So it's a true EDH deck. Flying.
Very nice.
When Galazeth Prismari enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. This card caught my eye because for my pre-release pack for Strixhaven, I got a Silverquill pre-release pack, right. And this was my promo card. So I was like, well, that doesn't feel good. But it piqued my interest because I've never really had like a spell-slinging deck. I really like creatures. And this deck proved difficult to brew.
Well, the first thing I notice when I look at this one is it suggests a certain amount of push and pull on you, because when it enters the battlefield, it creates a treasure token.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next line is that the artifacts you control have the ability to tap for any color. So you have a choice. Either you can tap the treasure token to get 1 mana of any color as long as you're using it for a sorcery or an instant. Or you can sack it to get 1 color, but you can use that for anything else.
Right.
So I guess the idea is then just play sorceries and instants, and you won't have any issues.
Yeah.
You'll just always just tap your treasures, and every time you add more treasures and more treasures and more treasures and more treasures.
Exactly.
You'll always have a pile of mana for sorceries and instants.
Yeah. So, like, how this deck kind of started was I noticed that you don't, like you said, you don't have to sack the treasures to use them for instants and sorceries. So really where I started was to create as many treasures as possible. I've got cards in here. Spell Swindle is my, like, one of maybe 2 counter spells in here. Spell Swindle says counter target spell, create X treasures, where X is that spell's converted mana cost.
So Andy, before we go any farther, does a treasure token require you to tap and sack it?
Unfortunately.
All right.
So because treasures are an artifact token that say tap, sack this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. You have to tap it and you have to sack it.
So in theory, you're not getting 2 mana for every treasure. You're just getting the 1. It's just a question of whether you get to use it again or not.
I have already made discoveries of what I want to add to this deck. I've got 1 card in particular that I really want to add that I just haven't yet.
Right.
But we'll get to that
later.
I've got a few things. Storm the Vault, one of my favorite flip lands, creates treasures when I deal damage. Malcolm, Keen-Eye Navigator, he's a flyer that creates treasures on combat damage. Gold Vein Pick, which is an equipment. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, which
Very
is
nice.
also sweet. We will see a number of artifacts, non-token artifacts in this deck, such as equipment, that serve a double purpose, because you can also tap the pick to add mana if you have Prismari out.
Right.
And it doesn't shut off the pick. You can just do it if it's still attached to something. Like, it's not old rules where you have to have it untapped for it to be activated.
I want to talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah. So I kind of started there with like creating as many treasures as possible. I also have got Brass's Bounty in there. And I really liked the idea that with treasures, you're essentially doubling your land base. Like, they're essentially acting as lands that tap to cast sorceries or instants. Because of the fact you don't have to sack them. And then I kind of went along the idea that, what if my creatures were artifacts? So I put in Brutaclad, I put in Mere Battlesphere, Sharding Sphinx, I put in two of the Saheeli Planeswalkers to create more artifacts, artifact creatures. And then I put in some big payoffs like Itali and Sunbird's Invocation, so that I could get bigger things, at least to also protect myself.
Right.
Something else that I also, you'll see a huge theme in here is doubling spells, because it's one thing to have burn in your deck in a
right.
commander deck where it just kind of, it does like one thing and then goes to the graveyard. But if you can double it, then that's great.
Right.
So for burn, I've got things like Jaya's Immolating Inferno, Karavek's Torch, Impact Resonance, Blasphemous Act, and actually I have Court of Iron here as well, which triggers on every of my upkeeps. If I'm Monarch, it deals 7 to any target.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And you've got Electro Dominance sort of also
playing
into this.
Electro Dominance helps.
Side.
Yeah, Electro Dominance helps kind of with the value of you just kind of add 2 red to any spell, and not only does it turn it into an instant, you're getting some damage out of it as well. And kind of along the same value line, I've got things like Tibolt's Trickery, which, for those who don't know, it's a 1 and a red instant. It is my other counter in the deck. It says counter target spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random, so you're most likely going to roll a die. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. This card saw a lot of kind of jankiness in Standard, where you would counter yourself and then you'd only have a certain number of cards that it would hit. But it works really well countering other people's things. They're going to have a lot of smaller things in their decks just because a portion of any deck is for ramp and a portion of any deck is for whatever. It's real spicy if you hit a counter, so then they can't play it or something along those lines but I really haven't had it do anything that I don't want it to do.
Right.
Got some more just instants and sorceries in here that would be nice to have go off. Role reversal, you get to exchange control of 2 permanents that share a permanent type. Doesn't have to be yours. Could be 2 opponents, or if you want to take something big in exchange for a token,
sure,
etc. Windfall, just to kind of refill your hand. Ingenious Mastery, also to refill your hand. Mind's Desire, if you've gotten on a very long turn, you can storm off and have a great turn.
Right.
Karn's Temporal Sundering, surprisingly easy to get to trigger because it's a legendary sorcery. You have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield to cast it. But you get to target player takes an extra turn, usually yourself. After this one, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand and then exile this card. So you're only going to have it go off once unless you copy it.
Right.
And then kind of a draw suite. Got things like Humble Defector, Magic Mirror, which also doubles as an artifact, and Factor Fiction.
Yeah.
Factor Fiction is real sweet to double. And that's kind of like the theme of the deck is doubling. Right. So, of course, I had to put in your boy Krark. I got things in here like Double Vision, which will just inevitably copy instants and sorceries on my turn. Got Primal Amulet, Pyromancer's Goggles, Melik, Is It Paragon? All these things kind of, they're recurring copying. Right. So the stack kind of gets messy, and it's easy to get around counters because they have to counter both.
Right.
It's great. Got a bit of protection. That's one thing that I wish this deck had more of is protection.
Okay.
But I've got things like Hercule's Recall.
Why does it need more protection?
Well, I think specifically my commander needs more protection.
Okay.
Granted, after you can build up your mana base pretty quickly with this deck if things kind of land nicely and you're creating a lot of treasures. But you can't, like, you'd have to be able to tap your treasures and not sack them for instants and sorceries. You need your commander out, so you need the protection. Granted, Hercule's Recall will help you bounce your more important artifacts to your hand, Mystic Forge, etc.
Right.
The things that you're using alongside the commander to kind of really go off. To other ways that I have in this deck to kind of go big with mana, I've got Leyline Tyrant, which is so sweet.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, it's 2 and a red for a 4/4 flyer. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. And when Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay any amount of red. When you do, it deals that much damage to any target. One of the last games I played with this, I had this out alongside Bergi, God of Storytelling. It's a 2 and a red, 3/3 legendary creature god. Whenever you cast a spell, add red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And then it has a thing about creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. But I don't have any boast in this deck, so not going there.
Right.
But it's real nice because with Bergi, you'll be adding a red mana every time you cast a spell. Bergi will hold on to it until the end of turn, but as she lets go of it at the end of turn, it kind of just transfers over to Leyline Tyrant.
Okay.
So
yeah,
as you're playing your spells, you'll be
piling it up.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've got Mana Geyser and Seething Song, which is always nice. Helps out with the storm as well. There's a few things that care about that type of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Goblin Electromancer, of course, has to be in here. Classic Is It card. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the big things with this deck. It's a lot of trying to get these big spells out to draw more cards to either get out big creatures like Atali or Sunbird's Invocation to kind of overwhelm your opponents with value, or just kind of, I think that's like the biggest thing with this deck is that it doesn't have enough of those win conditions.
Right.
It has a lot to do, but there's not enough payoffs. I've taken people out with Jaya's Immolating Inferno,
right?
Because it's so easy to build up so fast,
sure.
Especially with Galazeth out. Especially if you copy it more than once. I've had turns where things would be copied, 3 times.
Sure.
So you have 3 copies or whatever, which feels really cool. But it's also you're very quickly the target you're very quickly the one everybody's going after, because you're having these big plays where there's a lot of stuff coming down, or there's a lot of things happening. You're building up the stack and letting everything resolve, and it's frightening to be the center of attention.
and when you get access to this much mana,
right,
relatively quickly, because I mean, Galazeth does only cost 4,
right?
So these numbers can ramp up pretty quick, and with Galazeth, it's not like you're building for a single massive turn.
Right.
Galazeth is basically saying, I did this turn, I can do it again.
Yeah.
Without Galazeth, then it's one big turn, because you're burning treasure to make it happen. But
right.
So naturally, I'm drawn to Brutaclad, because, well, I have a Brutaclad deck. So I'm just curious, are you more often creating a creature, or more often creating the treasure? Because I know that you have ways, I know that the deck has ways to make Thopters, 2/1 mirrors, and treasure are the obvious ones. I mean, or is this just sort of a way to ramp everything into what you need at the time?
I think it depends on the moment in the game.
Okay.
I think I put it in there to end up turning everything into treasures, but also they more or less have with Prismari out,
right.
They more or less have the same value. Actually,
anyway.
Probably more valuable as mirrors,
sure,
because you can tap them for mana and keep them back as blockers.
That makes sense.
Also, I've got Saheeli's Artistry in here,
okay,
which is not an instant. It's a
sorcery for 6. Yeah. You can choose one or both. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact, and or create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Yeah. So the Artistry is a nice way to...
Yeah, it lets you create 2 artifacts that you can then tap for mana. But with Brutaclad out, you can then, because they're both tokens, you can turn all of your tokens into that thing.
Right.
The idea behind this card is to not only work well with Brutaclad, then you can steal somebody's, copy somebody's creature, right. Somebody else's like huge creature, and then turn all of your small things into big creatures, or just create, like, if you have, I don't know, I was going to say
create a lot of sharding sphinxes.
Exactly. Sharding sphinxes, Primal Amulet, you can make a bunch of Primal Amulets, so then not only is it tapping, can you tap them for mana, but they are also making your instants and sorceries cost less. Now, don't flip it, because I believe the land is legendary. No, it's not. Oh my god. Well, they're tokens. You can't flip them anyway. They don't have backside. Yeah, because it is a May ability, you can just keep them and everything costs 1 less, which is, let's see. You can make a bunch of Humble Defectors.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, there's plenty there to do. Solemn Simulacrums.
Yeah.
The Sphinxes, as long as it's not legendary, you're fine.
Yeah.
So
maybe I'll throw a Sakashima in here eventually to so then I can make copies of legendaries.
Right. Now, we hinted at this earlier, and you mentioned you mentioned the idea that some of the old school artifacts turn off when they're tapped. Now, for me personally, the one I think of more often than any of the other ones is Howling Mind, because Howling Mind turns off when you tap it. So in theory, in a deck like this, Howling Mind can very much be you draw 2 cards. Right. And then you can tap it on your turn to help play a sorcery.
I need to write this down.
So so that way you can tap it out, and then nobody else gets the benefit. Or you can just simply wait and tap it for, I guess, you can't tap it. Well, can you tap it for 1 mana of any color and then not play an instant or sorcery?
I would assume so.
I'm thinking you can, but in any event, with your,
I don't see
deck,
why not.
You're likely going to be playing a sorcery on most of your
use
phases
that
anyway. So
use that one first.
Right. So it's just essentially it's a land you want to play first. But the flip side of that is most of the all of the artifacts in your deck still work when they're tapped.
Yeah.
Because that was an old school rule that got canceled, and then the cards that continue to use that have a phrase errated on them that says they don't work when they're tapped. So while that might not be that big a deal for Arcane Signet, I was thinking more along the lines of cards like Lightning Greaves, because even if it's equipped, you can still tap it.
Yeah.
It still protects. It's just tapped. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's turned off.
I was very excited by the possibilities with equipment in this deck.
Right.
And there was a draft of this where there was a lot more equipment. Let's quickly take a break, and when we come back, I'll talk more about what I know that I'm missing from the deck, where I'm planning on going with it. And if you have any more questions, we can talk about those as well.
Oh, you better believe it. All right.
So we'll be right back.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Reverberate.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Reverberate. Fact or fiction, trash for treasure, mind's desire, because sometimes once isn't enough. And now back to you. Hey, we're back.
Hey, we're back.
This'll get old real fast. So before the break, we were talking just kind of about what made up the deck. And, I mean, I've played this countless times because there have been so many times that I just didn't have the correct land base. I think I had, it was very red heavy to begin with. Honestly, I only have 37 lands. I could probably use more, even though the idea of the deck is to both draw more and create a lot of treasures. You really... I mean, we said it last season. You really need 40 land to be able to do those things.
It can't be said enough.
Apparently, it can. I really need to up that land count, especially just those basics, honestly. I guess I could probably throw in 3 duels. I don't have any duels in this deck. Just find some good ones.
Well, I do have a few suggestions.
Okay.
But let's talk about some of the cards that you've looked at with the deck and are a little leery about, and other cards, because I know that you've already told me that there's at least a couple of cards you'd like to add into this.
Yeah. So, first up, Dalakos, Crafter of Wonders. He's a 2/4 for 1 blue and a red. He's, pretty good. He taps to add 2 colorless. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. It's fine. I think he was just kind of remnant of when there were more equipment in the deck.
Okay.
He really helps out with the equip cost.
Right.
But he also says equipped creatures you control have flying and haste. He's fine. He's great if you want to get down the 11 artifacts in the deck. But other than that, he's fine. Atali is just in there because I needed a big payoff. Something to do with a lot of mana.
Right.
Works really well, especially if you have the Greaves out. Just swap it over, go for it.
Sure.
I love that card, and if you have ways to copy spells, when he triggers, you can copy your opponent's spells, and it's amazing. But, like I said, he can be traded out for any big red or blue creature. There's no special reason he's in there. Other than that, things that I have also found that kind of only kind of work well. Gadrak, the Crown Scourge. He's a 5/4 for 3. He's 2 and a red. Legendary creature dragon, flying, of course. He can't attack unless you control 4 more artifacts, which super easy in this deck. At the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. So the idea behind him is that you're killing your opponent's creatures.
Right.
He blocks really well early game. I mean, for 3 mana, you've got a 5/4 flyer. But you'd expect him to do you'd expect it to really pay off well, and sometimes it just doesn't get there. Especially because there are so many instants in the deck, you're going to be doing a lot of things on other people's turns. So more than likely, your opponent's stuff is going to die on their turns.
Right.
So then, because Gadrak says at the beginning of your end step, you're not getting those treasures. So it's just it does create the treasures, which is nice, but it feels more niche than it is.
Sure.
He's definitely more of a you want to be attacking kind of creature. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the creatures. I really like Tago, Goblin Weaponsmith.
Okay.
I think he's my favorite creature in this deck. For 2 and a red, he's a 2/2. And he has a landfall trigger. It says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Rock. The Rock has equipped creature, has 1 and tap, sacrifice Rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target and equip 1. Landfall, you get an artifact. That's it.
Yeah, landfall, you're getting mana.
You're getting mana. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, no, that's spectacular.
And if need be, you can use it to throw at people.
Right.
So it's pretty sweet. Things that the biggest thing that I have wanted to put in this deck since I realized that there are artifact tokens that just sack for mana.
Right.
And that is gold.
Okay.
So treasures, you have to tap and sack for mana. You can use tapped gold for more mana. So
tap your gold and then sack it.
Tap gold with Prismari, and then you can sack it with its own ability.
Sure.
So essentially out of every gold, if you are willing to sack them, you get 2 mana.
So what red and blue cards?
There's 1.
Okay.
And it's a 1 mana enchantment, Aura, Curse.
Okay.
It's from C17. It's been in C17 and Mystery Boosters. It's called Curse of Opulence. It says enchant player. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a gold token. Each opponent attacking that player does the same.
Cool.
This will give your opponents gold, but it's going to give you gold, which, like I said, is pretty much giving you 2 mana with Prismari out.
Right, it's giving you 1 mana every turn until the Atali turn when you swing, and you need a lot more than you...
Well, with the Atali turn, you're getting those spells for free.
Okay.
But if you want to copy it, you're going to need a little bit
Right.
more. There are a lot of ways to dump your mana. And Curse of Opulence is the card that I need in this deck.
Sure, and if it encourages people to go swing somewhere else, then all the better.
That is something else that I've noticed about this deck, is that because you need Prismari out, not having enough protection is kind of a pain.
Right.
Luckily, he offsets his command tax every time he comes out because he's going to be creating a treasure.
Right.
But it's still kind of a pain to keep playing him out if people know that is as important to the deck as it is.
Right.
But that said, if it's going well, you're going to be creating enough treasures that you might not necessarily need them out. You'll just be using up the treasures instead.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of ideas, and these are relatively basic, straightforward ideas.
Okay.
With the land, there's artifact land, and I was thinking about Seat of the Synod and Great Furnace. Now, Seat of the Synod is an artifact land. It taps for blue. Great Furnace, artifact land, taps for red. But it comes with the added bonus with your with your commander, that it would also tap for either color if you're playing an instant or sorcery. And there's no real downside to it.
Yeah. I had Darksteel Citadel in here for that reason. I mean, especially since it's indestructible, which is great, but also I don't know why I haven't really just bought them.
The other one I was looking at was Treasure Vault.
Yeah, I mean, it's... so as of the time of recording, Adventures of the Forgotten Realms has not come out yet. But we are at the end of spoiler season. I think the full set was spoiled yesterday. Treasure Vault, for those who don't know, it's an artifact land, which already great because it'll tap for either red or blue. I mean, or if I somehow get other people's things and I need...
Right, it'll tap for any color as long as it's a sorcery.
Instant or sorcery. And then XX tap and sack it to create X treasure tokens. That's real good if I end up with ways to get it back out.
The difficulty, I think, with the Treasure Vault is you almost already have to be at a certain amount of mana for it to truly be useful. And essentially have nothing else happening. I mean, if you want 4 treasure tokens, then at the end of the turn you need to have 8 mana and the Treasure Vault because you have to tap it. So I understand that's the downside here. But
this would actually be pretty good in any deck that you're trying to win off of Revel and Riches. Because it's instant.
Right. Because you can do it at the end of the turn and then add. I mean, if you have 10 mana on the table or 10 lands,
right, and
in Treasure Vault is your 11th, and in theory you can add 5 treasures. On the end step. No, I mean, and I wanted to include Treasure Vault just because it's an artifact land that can then tap for blue or red. It doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, and honestly, the second ability is handy when you're stuck, when you're hoping on the next turn you're actually going to draw into something that's useful, and you just happen to have a lot of mana but not much to do with it. But yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of a card that would give you both colors. There's also, Silver Bluff Bridge. It's an artifact land that taps for blue and red already.
Oh, is that
enters
from
the battlefield tapped?
Modern Horizons 2?
I can't remember, but the more I think about it, it's not helpful. Because if it comes into the battlefield tapped, one, you've got a land that doesn't work for you for a turn. And on the next turn, well, that's great, it's an artifact land. So what? It already taps for blue and red, which is basically what you're going to need it for. So I'm not sure that you want to pull out another land to put this in where the upside is so small.
Especially if it's going to come in tapped.
Right. I mean, the only upside to this is that it can tap for any color of mana as long as you're looking for a sorcery or an instant. Well, yeah, so what? So can every other artifact you've got. So it's probably not worth the trouble. But I realized I lied. I do have a single duel in here. It's Cascade Bluffs. Yes.
But that's, I mean, hardly. Oh, and Is It Boiler Works? Wow. I'm a big fat liar.
Yeah.
Command Tower. What's the shock land? The blue red shock land.
Steam Vents?
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
You need more.
Is it? I mean, if you're just looking for duels and not considering the artifact part, then you want the get the multiplayer one.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
It's
probably comparable price to that.
Training Grounds, is that it?
No, Training Grounds is the enchantment that reduces.
It's something like that. But I mean, I really just need to bring this land count up.
Right.
Something that
just buy a couple. Yeah. I don't think you need a lot. And I mean, you've already identified it. I think you have so many ways to make treasures. There just needs to be more finish.
Yeah, I could probably take a few of the treasure creators out. Some of the less efficient ones. I've got Radiant Performer, which I just want to work. It's from the Prismari precon. It's 3 red 2/2 creature human wizard flash When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, choose target spell or ability that targets only a single permanent or player. Copy that spell or ability for each other permanent or player the spell or ability could target. Each copy targets a different one of those permanents and players. It's just like one of those things that I want to go off so badly, but I don't have any really any single target things for the most part. I mean, like Caravec's Torch I do and stuff, so like for an extra 4 I could have it hit everything, including my own things, which isn't great.
Yeah. I mean, you've got Jai's Immolating Inferno, Caravec's Torch.
I have a handful.
Any X spell.
Yeah, I have a handful of single target things, but it's mostly in there for, honestly, I guess like more of a assault factor. Like if somebody is like threatening my Prismari and with like murder, I'm like, oh yeah, well I murder everything. Yeah. But like that's the kind of thing I'm looking to do with this deck in the future, is to have more outlets that end the game, but also to keep Prismari alive. With obviously with like the boots and stuff, I can do that pretty easily. But that's that's one of 99 cards. Training Center is the blue-red crowd land, as people are calling it.
Okay.
Battle bond lands. I don't know. Bond lands. I feel like there's like so many words.
I think for Commander players, you just call it cheap duel.
Cheap duel. Because it was printed in Commander Legends.
If I can just open some Commander Legends.
I have been. But I'm hoping to get some of the lands. Some of the legends are pretty sweet. I've gotten a couple Malcolms. Malcolm is excellent, even on his own. He triggers on pirates, but he is a pirate himself. So
and I think a lot of people are ignoring Malcolm because of that. Yeah, and you do that to your peril. I mean, to me, Malcolm falls into the same sort of category as like Graveborn Muse. People look at Graveborn Muse and they see, where X is the number of zombies. Okay, so like I have to run it in a zombie deck. And you just don't. I mean, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card and lose a life. I mean, if that's all Graveborn Muse said, you would probably run it. Yeah. And I do have it in decks where it is the only zombie. Just because I want the draw. And I don't want, I don't necessarily want to have 15 zombies out and then suddenly be forced to draw 15 cards and find myself milling through my deck too quickly. But Malcolm has value in decks that aren't, it doesn't have to be loaded with pirates. Yeah. And I think the deck that you've got, this Prismari deck, is definitely one of them. So
yeah. I was just real excited to be able to balance well instants and sorceries with creatures, because I thought I was going to utterly fail that. And I mean, honestly, an early draft of this deck was very creature heavy. And I was like, this can't happen. Right. This is not what the deck wants to do.
Well, and that was part of what I was bringing it all the way back to the start. When we were talking about just Galazeth, I felt like there was, if there's too many creatures, then you're creating a push and pull with the deck. It's like, do I sack the treasures to be able to get the creatures out early? Or do I hang on to the treasures so that I can use them to play the sorceries and then still have them again the next time? Right. So it was just sort of a balancing act. And I know that 19 creatures, 13 sorceries, and 12 instants. So
yeah, I mean,
it seems like you found a balance. It's that works.
Literally a quarter instants and sorceries. And then 40-ish lands. And thank you for your suggestions. Anyone out there listening, if you have any suggestions or if you have your own Prismari build, feel free to tweet at us. On Twitter, we're falsepodmtg. Our email is falsepodmtg@gmail.com. What a coincidence. And it's called strong branding, right?
Yes.
And I think that's going to do it for us on this very special episode.
We got a magic game we got to get to here.
Yeah, on this very special episode of Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time, next week, Wednesday. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Have a great night, and may your 5th land be the Temple.
Bye!
Hey everyone, Andy here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Temple of the False Pod. Just a few housekeeping things here at the end of the show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe and give us a review. It really helps out the show. And it'll show us what you like about our podcast. Also, we've got a Twitter and an Instagram. Our handle is FalsePodMTG, all one word. So be sure to follow us. Feel free to reach out to us there or drop us an email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com and tell us your favorite magic-related story. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again to you and to Bruce. He's Mana Burned on Twitter, and I'm Andy Weekend on Twitter and Twitch. We're Temple of the False Pod, where our decks aren't optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Have a great night, and may your 5th land be the Temple.